Imagine walking into a room buzzing with the brightest lights, cameras flashing at every angle, where the world's most celebrated actors, directors, and influencers are gathered. The air is thick with perfume, ambition, and the unspoken tension of fame. Everyone is there for one night, one event, the American Cinematheque Awards 2025, and for one reason: to honor Michael B. Jordan. But among this glittering sea of Hollywood royalty stands someone whose own fame is enormous, whose presence alone can bend media narratives, and yet, in the span of a few seconds, she would feel what millions of fans have only ever seen in slow-motion humiliations online. Meghan Markle. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It started the moment she stepped onto the red carpet. The cameras were relentless, flashing like 1,000 tiny suns, capturing her every step, her every glance. She was dressed impeccably, a statement gown that shimmered like liquid gold under the lights, a deliberate choice that screamed sophistication, elegance, power. And yet, in that very instant, it became clear that power and glamour don't always command respect, even from the brightest stars in the room. Michael B. Jordan, the man of the hour, moved with an effortless confidence that drew attention like gravity itself. He smiled, waved, posed, and the room followed his rhythm. Meghan's presence, despite her celebrity, seemed to fold quietly into the periphery. Have you ever felt invisible in a crowd that should be celebrating you? Imagine the jolt of recognition and disappointment mixed into one, condensed into a single moment that would later ignite social media storms, gossip columns, and heated debates about celebrity hierarchy. That was Meghan's moment. But the tension didn't stop at visibility. It escalated when the cameras shifted focus from the general crowd to a particular photo opportunity. Michael B. Jordan, poised, charismatic, surrounded by A-listers and Hollywood heavyweights, was asked to step into a group photo. It was supposed to be a joyful, iconic image, a symbol of success, collaboration, and camaraderie. Everyone anticipated smiles, handshakes, and subtle nods of mutual respect. Except it didn't happen. Instead, the story took a turn no one saw coming. Michael B. Jordan declined to pose with Meghan and several other high-profile figures. A refusal, subtle in execution, yet loud in consequence, rippled through the room like a shockwave. Eyes darted. Cameras hesitated. Reporters whispered. And Meghan, for the first time in the public eye in a situation like this, faltered. The expression on her face, captured by hundreds of lenses, was a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and an almost imperceptible quiver of tears. Why would Michael B. Jordan, one of the most respected actors of his generation, refuse a photo? Was it personal? Professional? A calculated move? Or simply an offhand decision that inadvertently ignited one of the most talked-about Hollywood moments of the year? The truth was far more layered, more dramatic, and far more sensational than anyone could have predicted. Behind the polite refusals, the practiced smiles, and the polished speeches, a series of interactions, tensions, and backstage maneuvers were unfolding, invisible to the public eye but potent enough to turn a single event into a media spectacle. It's not often that celebrity interactions provide such a raw glimpse into the power dynamics, insecurities, and human emotions that exist beneath the veneer of Hollywood glamour. And yet, here, at this prestigious event, all of it played out in real time, documented by every angle of every camera, magnified through social media, and dissected by fans, journalists, and gossip mongers alike. Meghan's presence, once celebrated and admired, suddenly became a focal point of controversy, a case study in how fame intersects with ego, influence, and the unspoken rules of celebrity etiquette. Let's rewind a bit. Before the red carpet chaos, Meghan had prepared meticulously for this event. Every choice, from her gown to her jewelry, to the carefully curated smile, was deliberate. She had arrived with her usual entourage, a mix of personal assistants, security personnel, and publicists, each tasked with ensuring she not only looked impeccable, but also maintained her social sway among Hollywood elites. Michael B. Jordan, on the other hand, approached the evening with a casual confidence that belied his status as the centerpiece of the event. His reputation for professionalism, charm, and approachability preceded him, and attendees instinctively gravitated toward him, eager for glimpses, interactions, and the chance to be photographed alongside him. As Meghan approached the group photo area, she was met with polite smiles and courteous greetings, but then a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred. Jordan's attention remained fixed elsewhere, and when the opportunity for the photo arose, he quietly stepped aside. The refusal was not loud, not dramatic in the traditional sense. There was no verbal confrontation, no harsh words exchanged. And yet, the impact was seismic. Meghan's face, caught mid-expression by a press photographer, revealed a crack in her public composure. The hint of vulnerability, the first evidence of emotional disruption in an environment where she had always commanded control. Have you ever witnessed someone's carefully constructed world unravel in just a few seconds? That's what happened here. The initial shock was compounded by the reactions of others in the room. A-listers who had been chatting, laughing, and exchanging pleasantries suddenly paused, noticing the tension. Whispers began, subtle at first. Speculation about why a superstar would refuse a photo with a fellow celebrity. Cameras continued to click, capturing every nuance. And social media, as expected, began to respond in real time. Fans dissecting each expression, each gesture, each fleeting glance. This is where the stakes escalated. Meghan, who had previously been the center of attention at similar high-profile events, suddenly faced a reality she rarely encountered. That even fame, influence, and meticulous planning cannot guarantee control over how others perceive or respond to you. The humiliation, subtle as it may have been, was amplified by the omnipresent lenses capturing everything, by the whispers of journalists waiting to spin the narrative, and by the inevitable explosion of social media reactions. And yet, the public-facing moment, the refusal itself, was just the surface. Behind the scenes, backstage conversations, hurried phone calls, and discreet interventions were taking place. Assistants whispered, advisors tried to intervene, and Meghan's inner circle attempted to navigate the delicate balance between defending her dignity and maintaining her composure in a highly scrutinized environment. Meanwhile, Michael B. Jordan remained calm, collected, and seemingly unaware of the storm his quiet decision had ignited. This juxtaposition, her visible emotional vulnerability against his poised indifference, added layers of tension, drama, and intrigue to the unfolding story. Why does this story matter right now? Beyond the immediate spectacle, it illustrates the complexities of celebrity culture in 2025, the constant negotiation between image, perception, and personal interaction, the fine line between public adoration and social media scrutiny, and the emotional toll that such high-stakes visibility can exact on even the most experienced public figures. It also raises questions about power, influence, and hierarchy in Hollywood. Who dictates access, who commands attention, and who gets overlooked, even unintentionally, on nights designed to celebrate achievement. In just a few hours, what started as a glamorous, star-studded event would become a case study in celebrity dynamics, public perception, and media amplification. Meghan's tears, fleeting though they were, became emblematic of a larger narrative, one in which human emotion, ambition, and the unpredictability of public interactions collide in ways that no PR team, stylist, or social media strategist can fully control. And while the cameras eventually turned away, the incident had already sparked conversations that would ripple through tabloids, fan forums, and gossip channels for weeks. But here's the kicker. What you saw, or what the public saw, was only part of the story. Behind the lenses, behind the carefully constructed images of glamour and poise, events unfolded that no camera fully captured. Conversations were overheard, subtle gestures exchanged, and behind-the-scenes maneuvers orchestrated that added layers of intrigue and scandal to the night. These are the moments that define Hollywood history, moments that are remembered, dissected, and replayed in the court of public opinion for years to come. And so, we arrive at the threshold of the story. The red carpet chaos, the snub, the social media storm. All of it is just the opening act. What comes next involves whispered rumors, backstage confrontations, and revelations that will shock even the most seasoned followers of celebrity culture. It's a story that touches on ambition, ego, rivalry, and the human need for recognition and respect. And as we peel back the layers of this night, you'll see that what started as a simple photo refusal became a moment of profound public and private drama, one that Meghan, Michael B. Jordan, and Hollywood itself will feel the reverberations of for months to come. The red carpet stretched out like a ribbon of fire under the glow of 1,000 lights. Cameras flashed relentlessly, flashes popping in rapid succession, like staccato gunfire. Celebrities moved through the corridor with the poise of trained dancers, rehearsed smiles glued in place, and yet, every so often, that fragile veneer of perfection cracked. And then she appeared, Meghan Markle. It wasn't just her presence that drew eyes. It was the tension that followed her, subtle but unmistakable. She walked with a rhythm that spoke of confidence, authority, and an awareness of every camera lens pointed at her. Her gown, a shimmering cascade of silver and ivory, seemed alive in the light, reflecting each flash and creating a halo effect that screamed glamour. But even as the photographers called out her name, there was an unusual undercurrent in the room. Whispers, glances, an almost imperceptible pause in the rhythm of celebrity chatter. Something about the energy felt different tonight. From the very first step, the dynamic of the room shifted. Michael B. Jordan, poised and charismatic as ever, was already present at the center of a cluster of Hollywood A-listers. He moved with effortless ease, smiling, nodding, effortlessly commanding attention without appearing to try. This was his night, the culmination of years of hard work, accolades, and recognition from the industry. He was being honored not just for a single performance, but for the entirety of his influence in film and culture in 2025. Everyone wanted a piece of that energy, to be photographed alongside him, to bask in the reflected glow of his success. And yet, as Meghan entered the space, the narrative subtly shifted. You could almost feel the tension radiate from her. She was an experienced celebrity, no stranger to red carpets, public scrutiny, or high-profile events. And yet, something about this moment felt like walking into an arena where her presence wasn't enough to command the attention she was accustomed to. Have you ever experienced a moment where the world seems to pivot around someone else, leaving you momentarily adrift? That's exactly what was happening here. Her approach was meticulous. Every step calculated, every glance measured. The publicists and assistants flanking her were alert, scanning the room, ensuring that no camera angle was wasted and that she maintained the image she had curated for years. Her body language projected authority, but the subtle tightening of her jaw betrayed a flicker of anticipation, maybe even apprehension. And then, she saw him. Michael B. Jordan. He was exactly as he had always been on screen and in interviews. Confident, composed, magnetic. But here, in real life, the presence was more tangible, almost overwhelming. Celebrities gravitated toward him naturally, drawn by charm, by influence, by the aura of someone whose career had reached a stratosphere few could touch. As Meghan moved closer, attempting to join the cluster, the dynamics of attention became immediately apparent. Cameras snapped in his direction first, his smile lighting up the lens. Photographers and reporters, many of whom had been trained to prioritize Meghan, now shifted focus. And Meghan, who had long been accustomed to commanding the gaze of a room, suddenly found herself as just another figure moving through the periphery. It's in these moments, in the subtle shifts of attention, where the human element becomes undeniable. Meghan's carefully constructed poise, the confidence cultivated over years, met with a reality that no outfit, no smile, no curated charm could fully control. She had anticipated admiration, perhaps even envy, but the immediate gravitational pull toward Michael B. Jordan reminded her, and everyone watching, that fame is not an absolute currency. It is contextual, fluid, and often merciless. The paparazzi captured every step. The flashes created a staccato rhythm, punctuating the room with light and sound. Every camera aimed to freeze a moment that might tell a story. Meghan walking in, poised and elegant, Michael commanding the attention she had sought. There was drama in the contrasts. The shimmer of her dress against the matte confidence of his presence, the meticulous smile she practiced against his effortless charm. It was an unwritten narrative, unfolding in real time, and no one could turn away. Even the other A-listers sensed it. There were subtle changes in body language, the quiet recalibration of their own movements as they adjusted to the tension in the room. Some offered polite nods and greetings toward Meghan, but even these gestures seemed faint against the magnetic pull of Michael B. Jordan. The red carpet, intended as a ceremonial showcase, was quietly transforming into a theater of social hierarchy, visibility, and emotional stakes. Her publicists whispered in her ear, guiding her toward the photographers and potential interactions, but Meghan was already scanning the room, assessing, calculating. Each movement she made was deliberate. Yet behind the grace, the poise, the polished smile, there was the first flicker of doubt, a recognition that control had slipped, even if only momentarily. She had faced media scrutiny, tabloid attacks, and public judgment countless times before, but this was different. This was a live, immediate collision of two cultural forces, and it was happening in real time under the scrutiny of Hollywood's finest. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the group photo. Michael B. Jordan, the honoree, was gathering those closest to him, the people the cameras would frame as part of the celebration of his achievement. It was supposed to be joyful, ceremonial, a perfect encapsulation of recognition, admiration, and camaraderie. Everyone instinctively moved to participate. Meghan approached, ready to step into the frame, to be part of the iconic image that would circulate for years, maybe decades. And that's when it happened. Jordan, subtle and almost imperceptible in his execution, stepped aside. He declined the photo opportunity with Meghan and a few other high-profile figures. There were no harsh words, no overt confrontation. It was a quiet refusal, a small gesture that spoke volumes. And yet, the impact was immediate. Meghan's expression shifted, surprise, disbelief, and an almost imperceptible quiver of emotion passing across her face. Photographers froze, some unsure whether to capture the moment, some instinctively clicking to immortalize what they knew would be viral. A-listers murmured, some curious, some silently judgmental, as the energy in the room shifted again. It was the kind of moment that would later be dissected endlessly. On social media, in tabloids, in fan forums. Was it intentional? Was there history between them that fueled this snub? Or was it merely an offhand decision, one that carried the weight of interpretation far beyond its intention? The truth, as often happens in celebrity culture, was complex, layered, and hidden behind carefully managed public personas. Even more striking was Meghan's immediate response. She had been poised, composed, in control. But the subtle crack in her exterior, captured by lenses and whispers alike, revealed the human vulnerability beneath the celebrity facade. It was a fleeting moment, but a potent one, emblematic of a deeper tension, fame, influence, and the intricate dance of public perception. Have you ever been in a room where everyone seemed to be paying attention to someone else, leaving you questioning your own presence? That's exactly what was happening here. The red carpet, the cameras, the lights. All were secondary to the unspoken dynamics unfolding between two powerful figures in the room. And the consequences of that moment would ripple outward, influencing social media chatter, journalist narratives, and Hollywood gossip for weeks to come. Backstage, the atmosphere was equally charged. Assistants whispered in her ear, trying to steer her through the unfolding drama, attempting to recalibrate interactions and preparing her for interviews. Security and advisors observed the room, ever vigilant, ready to intervene if the tension escalated. Meanwhile, Michael B. Jordan remained calm, composed, seemingly unaware of, or deliberately indifferent to, the storm his quiet decision had ignited. This juxtaposition, her emotional vulnerability and his poised indifference, added a layer of intensity to the unfolding narrative. This was no longer just about a red carpet appearance. It was about visibility, hierarchy, and perception. It was about how even the most powerful individuals can be subjected to the subtle currents of influence and attention, how carefully crafted images can be disrupted by the unspoken decisions of others, and how fleeting moments of social dynamics can become defining memories captured in pixels and whispers. And as the photographers clicked, the murmurs spread, and social media began its rapid response. Meghan's presence became a flashpoint. This was no longer simply about being honored or attending a high-profile event. It was about the fragile, often volatile intersection of fame, ambition, and public scrutiny, and how even the most composed figures can be momentarily undone when the world doesn't respond as expected. But this was only the beginning. The refusal, subtle though it was, would set off a chain of events far more dramatic, revealing backstage alliances, whispered rivalries, and moments of tension that no camera fully captured. What started as a simple red carpet entrance had now transformed into a complex, emotionally charged narrative that would dominate conversation long after the last flashbulb faded. It happened in a blink, almost imperceptibly at first, but the room felt it immediately. One moment, the group photo was forming like a perfectly choreographed scene, everyone positioned with polite smiles and subtle hand placements. The next, a ripple of tension shot through the space like electricity. Michael B. Jordan, poised in the center as the honoree, had been approached for a group photo that included Meghan Markle and several other A-listers. The refusal was understated. No raised voices. No dramatic confrontation. Just a deliberate, quiet step back that made it clear Meghan would not be included in this image. A photographer captured the split second her expression faltered, an almost imperceptible flash of shock, disappointment, and hurt. The moment was fleeting, but the implications were monumental. In Hollywood, a photo op is more than just a snapshot. It is a statement, a currency of influence. And by declining, Michael had spoken volumes. What was going through Meghan's mind in those seconds? Anyone watching closely could see the internal whirlwind, a flash of confusion, the immediate recalibration of strategy, the rapid assessment of public perception. She had mastered red carpet diplomacy, the art of projecting grace under scrutiny, of commanding attention with a smile and a step. But this was uncharted territory. Have you ever been suddenly rejected in front of an entire room? A moment that exposes vulnerability you weren't ready to reveal? That's exactly what was happening. The other celebrities present reacted in subtle but telling ways. Some offered polite acknowledgement, nods of understanding, whispers of reassurance. But the majority were frozen by curiosity, watching how Meghan would respond, watching how Michael would handle the tension he had created. It was an unspoken social experiment unfolding in real time. Two powerful figures, a moment of refusal, and a room collectively holding its breath. Michael's demeanor remained calm. He smiled at the other attendees, posed for the cameras, and carried on as though nothing had occurred. But every glance, every angle, every click of the camera was magnifying the tension. He was not unkind, but his decision was deliberate, whether consciously or subconsciously. And the ripple effect was instantaneous. Meghan's composure, always so polished and carefully managed, showed its first cracks. She looked momentarily stunned, her eyes flicking toward him, searching for an explanation, perhaps hoping for some recognition, some acknowledgement that this was not intentional. But it didn't come. What's fascinating in moments like this is how the smallest gestures carry the heaviest weight. A step to the side, a flick of a hand, a slight change in posture. All of it communicates volumes. And the cameras, merciless in their focus, captured every nuance. For the audience, this was more than a photo refusal. It was a story of social hierarchy, of influence, of emotion laid bare. Journalists and photographers knew immediately that this would dominate headlines, fan discussions, and gossip columns for weeks. One frame, one decision, and an entire narrative was born. Meghan's inner circle was quick to react. Publicists whispered, advisors nudged, assistants gestured, trying to redirect her focus, to salvage control of the moment, to maintain the polished image that she had carefully curated over years. But even their interventions had limited effect. The emotional spike, the microsecond of vulnerability, had already occurred, and the cameras had immortalized it. What the public would see, and what the media would later dissect, was not just a refusal. It was a public exposure of a momentary human reaction in a setting designed to mask them. Now imagine being Meghan, accustomed to controlling narratives, anticipating admiration, and often being the centerpiece of attention. The red carpet, the glamour, the expectation of visibility, all of it suddenly shifted away from you. The experience was electric, disorienting, and profoundly uncomfortable. That's the reality of celebrity culture. It isn't just about presence. It's about recognition, attention, and validation. And when that attention is denied, even subtly, it can feel like a very public failure. Observers in the room noticed immediately. Whispers traveled from one cluster of stars to the next, speculation about why Jordan would refuse. Was there a history, a hidden tension, an unspoken rivalry? Or was this simply an oversight, a strategic decision to prioritize others in the room? The ambiguity magnified the drama. In Hollywood, ambiguity is a weapon. It allows narratives to be projected, reinterpreted, and amplified. And tonight, it worked to perfection. The social media response began almost instantly. Clips from the red carpet, photographs capturing Meghan's fleeting reaction, and accounts from attendees started circulating. The world began to react before the event had even officially started. Hashtags trended, some sympathetic, some critical. Fans debated intentions, body language experts analyzed microexpressions, and gossip outlets began spinning theories that ranged from playful to scandalous. In just minutes, a seemingly small gesture, a refusal to participate in a photo, had snowballed into a global talking point. But the drama wasn't confined to public perception. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Meghan's aides attempted damage control, offering calm reassurance, reminders to focus on the honor and not the perceived slight. Security scanned the room for any potential escalation, anticipating tension or confrontation. Michael, meanwhile, remained composed, interacting with other celebrities, delivering polite nods, and preparing for his speech. The contrast could not have been starker. One individual struggling to regain composure, another radiating calm confidence. And then came the whispers, the subtle, quiet commentary of those watching closely. Fellow attendees noticed body language, timing, and microgestures, interpreting the refusal as more than a single action. Conversations formed about alliances, influence, and social hierarchy. A-listers evaluated how this refusal would affect future collaborations, invitations, and public perception. In a room designed to celebrate achievement, a subtle snub became a focal point of social dynamics, strategy, and speculation. Even Meghan's expression, fleeting as it was, became a subject of intense scrutiny. Analysts dissected the microreactions, the slight downturn of her lips, the tightening of her jaw, the blink of her eyes. These were signals, unintentional yet deeply revealing, of emotional processing under extreme public pressure. And every lens, every observer, amplified these signals, turning a private reaction into a global spectacle. This refusal also set a precedent. It signaled to other celebrities and attendees that not all interactions were guaranteed, that status alone does not ensure participation, and that the dynamics of influence could shift in subtle but meaningful ways. It was a lesson in social hierarchy, humility, and the unpredictable nature of human interaction, even at the apex of fame. By the time Meghan moved away from the group photo, the room had shifted entirely. Cameras had caught the refusal, social media buzzed, whispers had multiplied, and the emotional stakes had been established. It was no longer just a photo op. It was a microcosm of celebrity culture, visibility, and the fragile balance of personal and public perception. And as Meghan adjusted her posture, trying to mask the emotional turbulence and regain composure, the next chapter of this unfolding drama was already in motion. Backstage conversations, subtle interventions, and unseen interactions would intensify the tension and amplify the fallout. The refusal was only the opening act. What followed would escalate the stakes, reveal hidden rivalries, and expose vulnerabilities that few in Hollywood had ever witnessed in such raw form. Backstage at the American Cinematheque Awards, the atmosphere was a completely different world from the dazzling red carpet. Away from the glare of cameras, the orchestrated flashes, and the perfectly framed moments, the corridors and lounges hummed with quiet intensity. Here, away from the public eye, the subtle games of influence, reputation, and control played out with a sharper edge. And for Meghan Markle, what had started as a minor embarrassment on the red carpet was about to escalate in ways she couldn't have anticipated. The moment she stepped behind the curtain, Meghan's composure began to shift. Outwardly, She maintained the elegant posture and polished smile that cameras had captured, but internally, the emotional ripple from Michael B. Jordan's refusal lingered. Her heartbeat quickened, a cocktail of frustration, disbelief, and humiliation flooding her senses. Have you ever tried to mask disappointment while the world scrutinizes your every move? That was exactly her predicament. Her team, usually a calming presence, was suddenly scrambling, whispering hurriedly about how to navigate the aftermath. Her publicists attempted to redirect attention, pointing her toward a small group of supportive colleagues and friends who had gathered for pre-event discussions. Yet the room felt charged, tense, almost like an electric storm waiting for a spark. Other A-listers were already discussing the incident in hushed tones, observers noting how the subtle refusal had shifted the social dynamics. A conversation meant to celebrate achievement now included whispers of rivalry, judgment, and speculation. Every glance in Meghan's direction seemed amplified, every footstep exaggerated. Michael B. Jordan, in contrast, was a portrait of calm poise. He moved through the backstage area effortlessly, shaking hands, exchanging polite words, engaging briefly with journalists conducting pre-event interviews. He appeared oblivious to, or entirely unbothered by, the ripple of drama that followed him. And therein lay the stark emotional contrast that only heightened the tension. Meghan, suddenly aware that her influence in the room was being tested in ways she had rarely experienced, felt the weight of every reaction, every micro-expression, and every whispered conversation. Backstage dynamics are a complex game of hierarchy and subtle signaling. Celebrities, their assistants, and their entourages all move in coordinated patterns designed to establish presence, assert influence, and manage perception. In this case, Meghan's entrance, her visible emotional response, and Jordan's refusal had disrupted the choreography. It was no longer a simple event. It had become a high-stakes social negotiation where each actor, publicist, and assistant had to recalibrate instantaneously. Her security detail hovered nearby, vigilant but cautious, aware that heightened emotions in a high-profile environment could lead to unpredictable situations. Meghan's aides whispered in her ear, offering reassurances and strategic advice. "Stay calm," one instructed. "Focus on the interviews. This isn't the red carpet. No one else needs to see the tension." But the tension was already visible, etched into the subtle lines of her face and posture, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the quick intake of breath as she processed the unfolding social landscape. Meanwhile, Michael B. Jordan's team moved with practiced ease, ensuring that the honoree remained unshaken, shielded from potential distractions. It was a masterclass in composure and professionalism, one that inadvertently highlighted Meghan's very human reaction. The contrast between the two star figures set the stage for the deeper emotional and social undercurrents that would dominate the evening. Even the other celebrities in the room were acutely aware of the imbalance. Some offered discreet words of encouragement to Meghan, small gestures meant to stabilize her, while others leaned toward Michael's entourage, eager to witness or comment on the developing narrative. Hollywood, after all, thrives on these subtle power plays, and the slightest misstep or refusal can ripple outward in ways that few anticipate. Every whisper, every glance, and every quietly exchanged comment added layers to the unfolding drama. One of the most revealing aspects of the backstage environment was the heightened observation. While cameras on the red carpet capture moments, backstage is where human behavior becomes raw, unfiltered, and revealing. Observers noted Meghan's attempts to regain composure, straightening her posture, masking the flicker of tears, rehearsing a polite smile for the next encounter. But despite her efforts, the energy in the room was palpable. Even without words, the emotional tension was thick, almost tactile. The whispers began to coalesce into theories. Some speculated that Michael's refusal was a personal choice, perhaps based on prior interactions or a strategic decision to prioritize other celebrities. Others suggested that it was unintentional, a mere oversight. Yet the ambiguity fueled drama, allowing room for speculation, gossip, and eventual social media amplification. Hollywood thrives on ambiguity, and tonight, the stage was perfectly set. Meanwhile, Meghan's aides tried to mitigate potential fallout. They encouraged her to engage in quick interactions with other attendees, suggesting casual photo opportunities, friendly conversation, and strategic positioning. Yet, each attempt at recovery was complicated by the emotional residue of the initial refusal. It is one thing to be snubbed on the red carpet. It is another to navigate the maze of subtle judgments, whispered comments, and silent assessments that occur backstage. As the pre-event minutes ticked by, the emotional stakes escalated further. Meghan noticed subtle shifts in body language from other A-listers, glances that lingered, smiles that were faintly strained, gestures that seemed loaded with meaning. The entire backstage area had become a theater of human behavior, where every movement, every glance, every nod was scrutinized, interpreted, and recorded in the minds of those present. The cameras weren't watching here, but the audience's perception was being shaped nonetheless. And then came the rumors, quiet, almost imperceptible at first. An aide from another celebrity whispered something about a past encounter, a minor dispute, or a perceived slight. Another suggested that social media would explode once the night began, amplifying the story far beyond the walls of the venue. Meghan's pulse quickened. She understood immediately the danger. Backstage whispers have a way of becoming public headlines, and once that narrative takes hold, controlling it becomes nearly impossible. Have you ever experienced a situation where what happens behind closed doors can shape public perception just as much, or more, than what happens in front of an audience? That's exactly the pressure Meghan was under. Her team worked furiously to guide her, offering strategies to regain composure. Yet the emotional undercurrent from the initial refusal continued to reverberate. The stakes were no longer simply social. They were deeply personal, intertwined with her reputation, her credibility, and her influence. And while Meghan tried to steady herself, the atmosphere backstage intensified further. Conversations shifted, alliances subtly realigned, and the energy in the room became almost tangible. It was a web of observation, speculation, and emotional interplay, with every participant, from the most junior assistant to the most celebrated A-lister, contributing to the tension. Meghan was acutely aware of it, navigating each step like a chess player, trying to anticipate reactions while managing her own emotional response. Even as she interacted with journalists and other attendees, Meghan's mind raced. Every question, every casual comment, every smile was being weighed for implications. How much could she reveal? How much should she conceal? Each decision carried the weight of potential amplification, each response a possible headline waiting to happen. And all the while, Michael B. Jordan's composed presence remained a counterpoint, a reminder of the effortless authority he projected in stark contrast to her carefully managed, but visibly rattled, demeanor. And then, just as she began to feel a semblance of control returning, a new development occurred, an unforeseen encounter with a surprise guest who had a front-row view of the red carpet incident. Their expression, a mix of curiosity and barely concealed amusement, signaled that the story of the refusal was far from over. Meghan felt a jolt of unease. Backstage, the rules were different, but the stakes were higher. This was not just about emotional recovery. It was about navigating a labyrinth of perception, reputation, and influence. The backstage tension, in other words, was only intensifying. Every whisper, glance, and gesture built toward an inevitable crescendo. The red carpet refusal had been the spark. The backstage dynamics were the slow-burning fire. And Meghan, caught in the middle of it, realized that this night, ostensibly about celebration, recognition, and honor, would test her composure, her social strategy, and her ability to maintain control in ways she had never encountered before. The moment the event began in earnest, Meghan felt the weight of the night press down on her chest like a physical force. Red carpets are supposed to be glamorous, filled with the thrill of recognition and the electric energy of cameras capturing moments that will define careers. But for her, the night had already started on a sour note. Michael B. Jordan's refusal to pose with her was not a minor inconvenience. It was a subtle but public rejection, a social slight magnified by the unblinking gaze of the world's media. And now, backstage and on the periphery of every conversation, the emotional spiral had begun. Imagine standing in a room where everyone is watching, but somehow you feel unseen. Every smile you force is analyzed. Every gesture is scrutinized. Every breath feels measured against some invisible scale of judgment. Meghan's heartbeat quickened as she tried to navigate the complex maze of celebrities, journalists, and assistants. Her polished exterior, the carefully rehearsed composure, began to falter as she processed what had just happened. A flinch here, a tightening of the jaw there, a momentary flash of disbelief in her eyes. These micro-expressions, captured by the most vigilant of photographers, told a story she wasn't ready to narrate. Backstage, the environment was tense but electric. Other attendees whispered and speculated about what had occurred on the red carpet. Who noticed the refusal? What did it mean? Was it personal? Professional? Strategic? Rumors spread like wildfire. Meghan, acutely aware of these whispers, struggled to maintain her outward poise. She smiled, nodded, and engaged in brief exchanges with fellow celebrities. But internally, she was unraveling. It's a strange thing, being so visible and yet feeling invisible at the same time. Have you ever tried to mask intense emotions in a situation where everyone is watching? It's exhausting. Meghan's mind raced, replaying the moment in slow motion. The polite smile she had offered, the subtle step forward, the silent refusal that had shattered her expectation of acknowledgement. Each second seemed to stretch endlessly, magnifying the sting of rejection. And as the adrenaline of the initial shock wore off, it was replaced by a creeping awareness. This moment would not be confined to the room. It would travel through social media, gossip columns, and fan forums, dissected, analyzed, and sensationalized for public consumption. Her aides noticed the change immediately. One leaned in, whispering softly, attempting to redirect her focus. "Stay calm, Meghan. Interviews are next. Focus on the media, not the snub." But words could only do so much. Meghan could feel the emotional residue from the refusal settling into her chest, a mixture of shame, frustration, and vulnerability. Even for someone who had navigated public scrutiny for years, the intensity of this exposure was different. The spiraling emotions manifested subtly, but undeniably. A slight hesitation before responding to a journalist's question. A fleeting downcast gaze that betrayed more than words could convey. A tightened grip on a clutch or handbag as if the object could somehow anchor her. Every micro-expression was magnified in the eyes of onlookers, a delicate dance of concealment and exposure. Meghan's efforts to maintain composure were heroic in their own right, but beneath the surface, her emotional state was becoming increasingly volatile. Meanwhile, the social currents in the room were shifting. Other celebrities and their entourages had begun to notice the tension. Some offered discreet words of encouragement, a polite smile, a brief nod. Others leaned toward Michael B. Jordan, discussing the incident in hushed tones, their curiosity barely masked. The human fascination with drama is universal, and tonight, the dynamics between Meghan and Michael had created a spectacle that transcended the event itself. The whispers, subtle as they were, added fuel to the fire. Every glance Meghan received felt loaded with meaning. Every gesture was interpreted as commentary, whether intended or not. The audience watching through media coverage had begun to speculate. Clips from the red carpet circulated online, the brief flicker of Meghan's surprise and discomfort dissected in minute detail. Fans debated the nature of Michael's refusal, intentional, a misunderstanding, or a social power play. Analysts dissected her micro-expressions, body language experts offered commentary, and gossip outlets framed the story as a tense, almost cinematic showdown between two global figures. What Meghan may have hoped would be a glamorous, celebratory evening had now been transformed into a public display of tension and emotional exposure. Inside, Meghan felt her composure eroding. Her thoughts raced. What would social media say? What would the press write? How would this affect her public image, her personal relationships, her standing among Hollywood elites? The emotional intensity was compounded by the fact that she could feel eyes on her, unseen yet palpable, observing her every movement. The human mind has a remarkable capacity to amplify perceived judgment, and in Meghan's case, it felt as if the scrutiny was magnified 100-fold. Her aides and assistants tried to intervene. They offered strategic advice, engage in small talk, smile for select photographers, participate in minor photo ops. maintain elegance and poise. But each action required energy, a delicate balancing act between projecting confidence and managing raw, personal emotion. Meghan felt every heartbeat, every slight tremor, every flicker of expression magnified in her mind. The very skill set that had made her adept at public appearances, the careful control of posture, gaze, and expression, was now being tested under pressure unlike any she had previously encountered. And yet, the emotional spiral was not purely negative. There was an adrenaline-fueled awareness, a heightened perception that made every interaction more vivid, every glance more significant. Meghan's mind raced with potential strategies, contingencies, and responses. She calculated social positioning, assessed potential allies, and monitored subtle cues from every individual nearby. It was both exhausting and exhilarating, a high-stakes mental game that reflected the complexities of celebrity culture, power dynamics, and human emotion under extreme scrutiny. The spiral was also fueled by uncertainty. Why had Michael B. Jordan refused the photo? Was it personal? A misunderstanding? A subtle attempt to assert hierarchy? The ambiguity allowed Meghan's mind to generate every possible scenario, each one more dramatic than the last. The emotional intensity of the moment was heightened by this uncertainty, and the inability to control the narrative only deepened the sense of vulnerability. Meanwhile, the cameras, still present but less focused backstage, continued to capture fleeting moments. A flicker of emotion, a subtle tremor of the hand, the slight downward tilt of her head. These micro-expressions spoke volumes, and while most of the world would never see them, those present did, silently recording the emotional tension that had gripped Meghan. Her internal struggle became almost palpable, a combination of human vulnerability, social pressure, and the weight of celebrity expectation. It is in moments like these that the human element of fame becomes starkly visible. Behind the sequins, the designer gowns, and the perfectly styled hair, there is a person experiencing intense, raw emotion. Meghan's spiral was a reminder that even those who appear most composed, most in control, are not immune to the impact of rejection, subtle or otherwise. And as the evening progressed, it became clear that this emotional current would continue to influence every interaction, every smile, and every strategic move she made. The backstage spiral reached a critical point when a minor confrontation occurred, a whispered exchange between Meghan and one of the event staff. No one overheard the words, but the intensity of the conversation, the subtle gestures, and the barely contained frustration communicated everything. The emotional peak of the spiral had arrived, manifesting in micro-expressions, slight tremors, and the occasional fleeting tear that she quickly blinked away. It was human, raw, and entirely relatable, even amidst the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. And as she stepped out toward the event space again, attempting to recalibrate, the knowledge remained. What had begun as a subtle refusal on the red carpet had set in motion a cascade of emotional, social, and professional consequences. The spiral was not just a private experience. It was a narrative in motion, observed, speculated upon, and amplified by every layer of the entertainment ecosystem. The glimmering lights of the American Cinematheque Awards weren't just for the cameras. They were a mirror reflecting the silent judgments, whispered observations, and subtle evaluations of Hollywood's most elite. While Meghan Markle tried to regain her composure after Michael B. Jordan's refusal, the reactions from the surrounding A-listers quickly amplified the drama, transforming a personal moment of humiliation into a full-blown social spectacle. It began with subtle glances. A smile too quick, a head tilt too pointed, a lingering pause in conversation. Every seasoned celebrity understands these micro-moments. They are the unspoken language of the elite, where gestures, expressions, and timing speak louder than words ever could. Meghan, acutely aware of this undercurrent, noticed the way eyes followed her, speculated on her reaction, and cataloged every movement she made. Her public persona, carefully curated over years, now faced the scrutiny of her peers in real time. A few of the more socially adept A-listers approached Meghan with the intention of support, offering polite nods, half smiles, and small, seemingly innocuous comments. "You're radiant tonight," one murmured. "Everyone noticed your entrance," said another. Their words were kind, but the underlying tension in the room made every compliment feel measured, loaded, and, in some ways, performative. Social observation is second nature among Hollywood elites. Support and competition exist side by side, often in the same breath. Meanwhile, others had taken a different approach. Some whispered amongst themselves, eyes flicking toward Meghan and then to Jordan. Phrases like, "Did you see that?" and "That was bold" floated through the backstage corridors, subtle yet undeniable. These whispers carried weight. In Hollywood, gossip is currency, and tonight, Meghan had become the center of an invisible but powerful exchange of information, interpretation, and judgment. The irony of the moment was almost cinematic. Here was a room full of people accustomed to public scrutiny, media attention, and the constant pressure of image management. And yet, one subtle gesture had introduced a social ripple that none could ignore. Michael B. Jordan's refusal, quiet as it was, had set a standard of narrative that others instinctively followed. Those around him, observing the power dynamics, began adjusting their own behavior, whether consciously or not. They laughed a little louder at his jokes, nodded slightly more eagerly, and subtly recalibrated their positioning. It was a silent acknowledgement. This moment belonged to him, and Meghan's influence had been temporarily eclipsed. Meanwhile, Meghan's team attempted to salvage what remained of the evening's balance. Publicists, aides, and security personnel engaged in a delicate dance, guiding her interactions, creating opportunities for positive media exposure, and subtly redirecting conversations away from the initial snub. But in the intricate ecosystem of Hollywood relationships, backstage maneuvering is rarely foolproof. Every attempt at recovery was met with observation from those around her. Each gesture, each smile, each word analyzed for authenticity, intention, and emotional truth. What makes these reactions so compelling is the combination of human psychology and social hierarchy. Hollywood A-listers are experts at reading subtle cues, interpreting gestures, and reacting to perceived power shifts. The refusal was more than a slight. It was a signal, a subtle reordering of social influence. Meghan, usually accustomed to commanding attention, now found herself navigating a complex landscape of interpretation, where every move could reinforce or undermine her perceived status. The media, both present in the room and watching remotely, quickly picked up on the tension. Reporters noted microexpressions, social cues, and the evolving dynamics. A camera panned across the room, catching a fleeting flicker of Meghan's surprise, a glance from Jordan that appeared almost casual, and the reactions of others caught in between. These small, silent moments would later fuel discussions, tweets, and gossip columns, turning what was meant to be a celebration into a multi-layered social story. Some of the most revealing reactions came from the A-listers who were neither supporting nor dismissing Meghan. They were observing, cataloging, and evaluating. Their reactions ranged from polite indifference to subtle amusement, but every action was deliberate. In Hollywood, being an observer is as much a performance as being the center of attention. The room became a stage where social intelligence, emotional perception, and strategic positioning were on full display. What added to Meghan's discomfort was the awareness that these reactions were not confined to private observation. They would inevitably spill into public perception. Every whisper could become a headline. Every glance could become a GIF, dissected and shared across social media. This awareness intensified her emotional response. She had spent years mastering the art of public poise, carefully managing appearances and maintaining a controlled image. Yet tonight, control was slipping through her fingers like fine sand. One subtle reaction amplified the tension even further. An A-lister, someone Meghan had previously counted as an ally in Hollywood circles, leaned slightly toward another guest and whispered something that was just audible enough for Meghan to catch, a phrase laced with surprise and a hint of judgment. The words were innocent enough on their own, but in context, they amplified the social pressure and emotional intensity she was experiencing. Each whisper, each micro-expression, each subtle gesture added another layer to the emotional spiral she was navigating. Meanwhile, social media had begun to react. Clips from the red carpet were circulating online, showing the refusal in slow motion. Fans dissected every movement, every glance, every expression. Analysts offered detailed breakdowns, commenting on micro-expressions, body language, and social positioning. The digital echo amplified the real-time reactions happening in the room, transforming a personal moment into a global conversation. The intensity of these reactions added a psychological layer that Meghan could feel pressing down on her with every interaction. Have you ever felt like the room itself is against you? Like every whisper, every glance, every gesture is a commentary on your presence? That's the exact feeling Meghan was experiencing. She attempted to navigate the room strategically, moving toward friendly faces, engaging in polite conversation, and maintaining the outward composure that cameras would capture. But even the simplest interactions were now tinged with the shadow of the initial refusal, every smile evaluated for its authenticity, every word measured for its impact. The reactions of the Hollywood elite also highlighted an unspoken truth. No matter how carefully curated your image, no matter how much influence you wield, there are moments when you are vulnerable to the judgment of others. Michael B. Jordan's refusal was not just a personal snub. It was a social signal, a recalibration of attention and influence that the rest of the room instinctively recognized and responded to. Meghan's emotional response, fleeting as it might have seemed, became a catalyst for observation, speculation, and silent judgment. Even the more empathetic A-listers could not fully shield her from the ripple effect. Polite gestures of support, smiles, and nods were overshadowed by the invisible tension in the room. Every move she made, every conversation she initiated, every laugh she forced herself to express was filtered through the lens of the refusal and the reactions it generated. The social dynamics had shifted in a way that was subtle, yet profoundly impactful. By the time Meghan attempted to regain some equilibrium, the network of observations, judgments, and subtle positioning had already been established. The room had witnessed, interpreted, and internalized the refusal in a way that would influence interactions for the rest of the evening. Her emotional state, the carefully calibrated expression of poise, and the lingering tension from the red carpet had all converged to create a moment of intense scrutiny and psychological pressure. And yet, the night was far from over. The reactions of the Hollywood A-listers, while immediate and impactful, were only the beginning. Conversations would continue to ripple through the event, whispers would turn into stories, and subtle alliances would shift. The interplay between perception, emotion, and social strategy was still unfolding, and Meghan found herself at the center of a narrative she could neither fully control nor predict. It started slowly, almost innocuously, with a single clip posted online. A fan in the front row had captured the exact moment Michael B. Jordan refused to pose with Meghan Markle and a handful of other high-profile figures. The video was just a few seconds long, shaky, a fraction of a second of hesitation, a step to the side, and a flicker of Meghan's reaction. But in the digital age, moments like this explode faster than anyone can anticipate. Within minutes, the clip had begun circulating on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Notifications pinged relentlessly on phones around the world. The effect was instantaneous. Social media, the modern court of public opinion, became a magnifying glass, illuminating every micro-expression, every subtle gesture, every nuance of body language. Meghan's brief flicker of surprise and discomfort was replayed over and over, dissected frame by frame. Fans debated her reaction. Was it shock, disappointment, frustration? Some argued it was overblown, others insisted it was a sign of humiliation. Michael B. Jordan's calm, composed response was contrasted with her visible tension, creating a narrative of poise versus vulnerability that captivated the online world. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Hashtag Meghan snub, hashtag Michael B. Jordan, hashtag American Cinematheque 2025, hashtag red carpet drama, all started appearing in feeds. Social media algorithms, trained to amplify engagement, recognized the high-volume discussion and further boosted visibility. Suddenly, a backstage tension and red carpet snub became a global spectacle, dissected by millions in real time. Even casual viewers, who may have had no prior interest in the event, were scrolling through clips, forming opinions, and sharing reactions with their own networks. The virality of the content was driven not only by Meghan's reaction, but by the narrative the clip created. Two celebrities in a highly charged, emotionally nuanced interaction, one calm, one visibly rattled, told a story without words. Humans are naturally drawn to stories of power dynamics, rejection, and emotional vulnerability. Meghan's subtle but significant emotional response was amplified precisely because of this innate fascination. Social media became the amplifier, broadcasting the moment to a global audience with commentary, memes, and GIFs that spread faster than any official coverage could. Journalists and entertainment reporters immediately pounced. Online articles and live updates chronicled the incident, often using provocative headlines to maximize clicks. Michael B. Jordan snubs Meghan Markle, red carpet humiliation, or Hollywood tension erupts at American Cinematheque Awards. Each headline further fueled the conversation, prompting readers to watch the clip, form opinions, and share their reactions. The speed of the digital reaction was staggering, turning a fleeting red carpet moment into a 24/7 news cycle almost instantly. Even influencers and social media personalities joined the conversation. TikTok creators dissected Meghan's body language. Instagram commentators speculated on the underlying reasons for the snub, and Twitter threads exploded with analysis, jokes, and memes. The viral momentum created an echo chamber where every perspective, from supportive to critical, added layers to the narrative. And in this environment, the story was no longer just about the event. It became about public perception, cultural discussion, and the spectacle of fame itself. The clip of the refusal also fueled heated debates among fans. Supporters of Meghan expressed sympathy, highlighting the human element, the vulnerability, and the challenge of maintaining composure under such scrutiny. Critics questioned her reaction, interpreting it as overdramatic, self-centered, or unprofessional. Michael B. Jordan's fans weighed in as well, defending his right to choose who he photographed with, emphasizing his professionalism, and questioning whether the moment had been blown out of proportion. The conversation became a global dialogue about celebrity behavior, power dynamics, and social etiquette in high-profile settings. Even celebrity observers and media analysts joined the fray. Entertainment news programs aired slow-motion replays of the clip, analyzed micro-expressions, and invited experts to discuss the psychological implications of public rejection. Body language specialists interpreted Meghan's gaze, posture, and hand movements, offering commentary on what it suggested about her emotional state. Some suggested it was